Well, yeah, I don't know what can follow that. Yes, but let's just say that medieval Europe is a formation, as you cooks will know, about stews and a long process of mixing. Medieval Europe, of course, will be formed by the mixture of three different parts, as the textbooks always say, as far as I know: Roman, Christian, and German. And I used to think about that, these simplistic statements that we always put in textbooks or Cliff Notes for those who wait till the last minute to study. I don't know any of these people personally, but if you know anybody, or maybe even had an offspring like that, you will relate. But the idea is obviously that as we look at these three elements, they are not of equal value, and they don't just all come together and then everything is now welcome to the Middle Ages. By the end of this course, we will be in Christmas 800. And you'll think, wow, you mean it takes that long to create the mixture here? No, we've got a false start. But if you come back in 2024, I'll have a Middle Ages for you. But it will take all this term just to talk about the elements and the efforts to mix, because as you can understand already, and you'll see in greater detail, this is going to involve the mixture of very disparate elements, because Romans and Germans don't necessarily mix well. They say, but we're all Christians and let's have a big hug. I think that's going to be really tough. And we're talking about creating Western Europe, really. And we understand, of course, that these elements are very different. And some people forget that and just think, by the end of the term, will this be on the final? Do we have to be able? Oh, and you wouldn't believe doing a blue book and having to read about that, because they don't really appreciate the fact of the tremendous differences we find here. Because I would have people, still do, ask me, well, were they really Christians? I said, well, I don't know that. I know, it's like, was I there to give them some sort of a truth test, or are you a real believer, or are you just pretending, gooseneck lamp or something like that? Yeah, it's like, it's a very, very odd business when you are trying to think about what's true and what's not. But let's just say this is what we have as three elements. What is it they say now? It is what it is. I loathe that, by the way. But you get the idea of these three elements. Oh, it's map time. And I got to say, this is one of my favorites. It really is, because this is basically the period that Gibbon called, and it was Gibbon, the Pax Romana. And this particular term has been applied to the Pax Britannica of Palmerston in later history, or the Pax Americana. It's the idea that these areas that you see in red are quote unquote civilized by the Romans. And we know that we like a clean map, but we're all mature and sagacious enough to know that maps don't always tell the whole story. So we look at these areas and you say, but I love Scotland and Ireland. I've spent a lot of happy times there. Well, they don't make the cut. Okay, I'm sorry. They not in the Pax Romana. Don't say that to any Scottish fans. It's hurtful. They may be sensitive. And you go on down. You say, but what about the Sahara Desert? Can they get in the Pax Romana? Didn't make it. That's a Roman call. And again, we look at these various areas and you say, was it ever in the planning stages? Well, I mean, what are the songs? To dream the impossible dream? I'm sure there were Roman military strategists who said, maybe next decade or so, we can get this area. They never were in a position that they were saying, this is all we want. They've got lots of what we call today resources for expansion. And of course, many of us are aware that when we go up in the Northeast and we think of those areas, modern day Netherlands and Belgium and all up in Western Germany, you do think about, shall we say, the sad time of Caesar Augustus, because he lost several legions trying to conquer that area. Oops. So if you look in that area and you say, but why isn't that red? We tried. We didn't make it. And so that's why it's not red. They basically decided maybe another time. But you can see this is it. Not complaining. It's about the 48 states without Hawaii and Alaska, if you're thinking of land. Not so much populace, but land, yes. And these areas that you see are pretty much what you got. And this would be the Pax Romana. What does it really mean? Well, it means, according to Gibbon and followers of Gibbon, that this area is under Roman authority. It's hardly perfect. I don't think anyone ever said that. And it's, there is that tendency we all have to say there's this and that and the other. But if you ask people who love Rome, no one else has quite ever been able to pull this off. It is Roman authority over disparate people, and some of them liked it better than others, I'm sure. Some were already, quote unquote, civilized. And that's a debatable word in this day and age, I guess. But if you were in the East, you were more likely to be urban, literate, accustomed to some sort of advanced authority, whereas in the West, you were more inclined to be tribal. And when the Romans come, they say, okay, and we're in charge. And you know what you're going to have to do? Start declensions and conjugations. And you say, oh, no, you mean, yes, Latin 101, you loser. Yes, I mean, civilization can be rough. Yeah. Pluperfect perfect passive. I'll never forget that as long as I live. The tense. Yeah, that can be very abusive. Yeah, you get on high Latin and you can imagine and try on your new toga. Because these poor folks said, well, we never had to wear stuff like this before. Yeah, but listen, your new name is Publius. Okay, and you're going to have 5 conjugations, 4 declensions, a world of hurt. You'll learn. It's not good to lose to the Romans. So that's part of being in the Pax Romana, definitely. Mare Nostrum, our sea. And of course, this is the great economic trade unity that the Romans supposedly picked up. Many of us, of course, know that they inherited some of this from Carthage, but I don't think the Romans were going to say, we want to introduce you to our good friends from Carthage. Hannibal, would you stand up and take a bow? No, I think they pretty much took all of this for themselves, and understanding the Roman Navy, and of course, understanding that, as the term Mare Nostrum would suggest, our sea, this is all about us and our control. And if you want to come into these areas, you'll do so on our terms. And it is an economic unity, and it is, at least during this period of Pax Romana, it seems to be a sense of working between the areas of advanced and less advanced. What do you Western people do? Well, you sort of supply the raw materials, and in the East, then we are responsible for doing something with them, making them productive. I don't think there's ever a chance to make the two parts, East and West, equal, because they couldn't be, because the East was so far advanced. And of course, some of you will remember that the Eastern areas were what we call Hellenistic. They had been dominated by the Greeks, Alexander the Great. They had their cities, and they had advanced economies, whereas the West was not. And so the Romans there in what we call Italy was simply utilizing what it considered to be the best of both worlds. And they were, you might say, like the great clearinghouse. And of course, over and over again, we emphasize the role of Rome, because even though Rome's on the Tiber and might not seem like the middle of the world, it certainly seemed so at that time, considering all the areas that were based on it. How long did the Pax Romana last? Again, Gibbon, 96 to 180. And again, in history, we love those dates because inevitably some 18-year-old new to Auburn will come up to me and say, do we have to know dates? And of course, my skin crawls. I mean, it's like, how could you ask this? I said, no, you are not going to be on Jeopardy. This is not going to get you money, filthy lucre, or anything like that. It's the beauty of knowledge. He says, whatever. So it's like, the dates are merely for the convenience of the area of knowing the five good emperors and the period in which, as Gibbon tried to reimagine the past, he would say they seem to have it all together. Because when you read what he writes, he's obviously writing with a certain amount of tongue in cheek, knowing about women, knowing about most peasants, because the greatness of the society was very elitist. I don't think he was ever in any way fooled by that. It's just that people have taken it in any modern sense. But so it's not utopian. It's simply to understand that it's a kind of like, we're Romans and you're under our authority. Now, do you want to accept that? Because we're bringing you peace, loser. Because remember, you lost the war. And we want to work with you, but we're prepared to hurt you if not. And you say, gosh, you're so big and strong. Can we just get along. So many of these groups did accept Roman authority. Not always did they like it, because you can ask the Jews in Palestine. Boy, they, as we like to say in education, they cut up a lot. Because that was a rocky relationship. You call it love and hate, I'll just call it hate. But yeah, it's like that period many of us have seen and know about from the Dead Sea Scrolls and all the rest. Fascinating stuff. So you really can't say, gosh, they had on shirts, wheat, heart, Rome, or something like that. I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of collaborators, to be honest, among the Jews, but others were not. And there were other groups that opposed Roman occupation, but that just gave more work for the army, I guess, and more tasks to maintain the authority, because they weren't going away. I'm not aware that at this point, the Pax Romana, the Romans were going to say, well, shoot, I didn't know you didn't love us. We'll leave then if you feel that way. It's like the revenues, because remember, there's got to be a certain occupation tax. You got to kind of help us with our defense fund. And, it's like all of this costs for us to maintain the armies. Some of you have probably seen, like I have, when you go to the British Isles and see Chester or somewhere like that, and you see the ruins of Roman fortress. And I think about those poor little Italian boys being off in places like that. I don't mean they were having to eat British food, but I mean, it's like the weather. I mean, if you were from Italy and you'd say, yuck, it's cold. And if you've seen the sun by noon, great day. Have you ever noticed they're real white? Yeah, there's a reason. So the idea is that all of these military forces made Rome quite expensive in terms of maintaining it. So remember, the Pax Romana is not free. It costs people, but it's sort of that attitude, it's like you would tell your children, someday you'll appreciate me doing this. And they'll say, right. Yeah, I'm sure many of these peoples, like Jews in Palestine, or what we say, Celts in Britain, are saying, maybe so. I mean, if you got to learn Latin or wear a toga, maybe you would say that too. And, not really mean it. There are people who do lie. But anyway, we do make ourselves aware of that. And the Romans were very proud of this. But again, I think the term Pax Romana is an 18th century invention. So I'm not thinking this is necessarily a clear concept from the period. Now, problems. We always love problems. So the idea, of course, is what was wrong with Rome? Well, I could say, regardless of what was wrong with it, has anything else lasted that long? I don't know of anything. I think about another people that I really love, the Persians, because the Persian Empire, that did mighty well. A minus, some B plus. I think Cyrus here. So for the length that Rome goes on in terms of the empire, you got to give them a lot of credit. So I'll let that go and just note about the imperial succession. And we understand that it's very hard to get from one emperor to the other. I won't bore you with details here, but just to note that the Romans tried the family, and we know how that can cause problems. The names of Caligula and Nero immediately come to mind. And you say, but he seemed like such a nice boy. It happens in the best of families. So we won't prolong that except to note they tried to figure out a way, who will be the new leader? Will the real emperor please stand up? You remember the show? It's over and over again how that could come about, the peaceful transfer of power. And they did seem to find a way during the Pax Romana with the emperor basically choosing his own candidate. It's like junior, intern, that kind of thing. Someday all this will be yours, like that sort of attitude. And it works really well until a son comes along. You know how that goes. Why can't I have it, Dad? Those types. So we'll get to that. But just to notice that this is a problem. And of course, the generals, they cause their problems too. They get off in their part of the world with their armies. And of course, inevitably, I'm not a civilian. I'm a great general. I ought to get more respect. And the problem with this is going to be, I guess you'd say, lack of supervision for many of these military units, and the power that they can exert in their particular area of the empire will lead to civil wars. And it's amazing, as I say, that it held together as it did. Think about all those centuries. Civil wars, again, fighting over, will the real emperor please stand up? Or fighting between generals who want to take power. Now you say, was this new? I think not. Shall we go back to Julius Caesar and Pompey? We could do a whole Roman Republic, but I'm not going to. You're safe. I'm going to keep it here. Just to make you aware, though, that the idea of different leaders falling into arguments and saying, my army's bigger than your army, all of that sort of thing, I'm afraid goes with Roman history. I'm not aware of a period where everybody's saying, I love you, brother. And, we're all about pan-Romanism and let's just love each other. Inflation, is that a surprise? Not really. It shouldn't be, because West and East have such divergent economic ideas. And what they're saying is, in that argument, and this is a major argument, has been all along, when people come up with some sort of economic interpretation, because they will say, all that political, that's always been. Now, give me some economics. And the economics is simply this, that since the West was not well developed, it was never in a position, in terms of trading with the East, to pay for much. As a result, the East was always the wealthy section. They had the cash. So prices were inflated, and the way the Romans dealt with it is, I'm afraid, like modern governments, they just make more money. And so, of course, the money has less value. And there you have inflation. They talk about the money decreasing in value as they went along. And we all understand the dangers of inflation to a society. So this was a significant problem. And the whole issue of how do you control it is an issue that the Romans, and maybe even the Americans, never really came to solve. They will try, but it doesn't really compute, particularly because you have an increasing population loss. The idea of infanticide has never, I mean, they encouraged people to have children. I remember Caesar Augustus' wife, quite a character herself. She was like Gold Star Roman mother, and she would sponsor women could come from all over the empire, and there'd be some big reception. You know, you got pregnant the most times. And you're thinking, wow, fun you, yeah. And those of you who had children, you think, wow. But anyway, these folks were just having them. And then, you could send in your submission. There used to be a show on television. Hey, you may remember this. It was called Queen for a Day. Oh, it was ghastly. Awful. That, I mean, not a censor here, but I'm just saying, I said, I'm so glad that I'm not this big person. But anyway, the idea of these various people from various parts of Rome, oh, how many do you have? Oh, 10, 12, I lose track. They're just all, I know, but they're just all cute and fun. Just can't get enough. So the idea is that this population, they pushed it as hard as they could, at least according to what I've read. And the idea of population decline seems to be a hard reality that historians have never exactly understood, because people were not consciously practicing birth control or had very limited knowledge of birth control. So that really isn't it. Could it have been that people were deliberately trying not to have children? Possibly. But whatever and you say, well, maybe they moved away. Well, I love that. But where are they going? It's always like that. If you want to use that argument, let's see where our U-Haul is going to take us to. Yeah, I just don't see it. Hey, this is the Roman Empire. This is a pretty good place. And again, we always have to ask ourselves about population statistics, don't we? When you're thinking about how many people who was counting the people in the Roman Empire in the first century. I mean, I worry about it from my own period, the Middle Ages. And when you think about back then, I don't know if we really understand that, except to say that there does not seem to have been a large population in the Roman Empire. So it's probable they were encouraging peaceful settlers. So the argument goes. Decline of cities. Well, of course, that's mostly in the West, right? Because the cities of the West had been created during Roman times. In other words, they had a limited lifespan. And remember, for a city to exist and thrive, it's got to have a real purpose. This isn't just a market town. But as long as the Romans were a major force, administration, what have you, toga shops, language people, coming in, because you think you got to call the Yellow Pages to get your Latin teachers. Yeah. Oh, I thought about being a Latin teacher and inflicting that. I know. Poor children. Yeah, that's so cruel. But yeah, it's like the idea is over the years that will follow, we see the cities in the West decline because there's not much for people to do. And the wealthy, such as they are, will become essentially country people. They already had estates. Don't worry, they didn't have to buy them. It's in essence, they already had lands, but now the cities lose significance. So these people retreat to what they call, remember, plural, second declension, latifundia. Does that bring back memories? Okay. We can talk after class, okay? Because we'll start you on a declension path. Latifundium, latifundia. And these latifundia, I guess, what would you call them now? Plantations? I know I wouldn't want to be a colony because these are serfs. They're not slaves, because slaves have a different economic value. Serfs are people who basically are bound to the soil but can't be sold. So they are there and they are pretty much attached. And this is going to be an important population. Now, again, I remind you, the urban population is drying up because there's nothing to do, except maybe provide military supplies, because remember, the cities came out of nowhere thanks to the Romans. And when the Romans sort of retreat in the West, cities kind of dry up. And of course, those who are always waiting for the Romans to fail. And I mentioned specifically Persians and Germans. Remember, much of what we call the Roman Empire in the East was fought over by the Romans and the Persians. We think of Iran. Well, I mean, you can't cut on television now without thinking about Iran, can you? So basically, the Romans had advanced pretty well east, but the Persians were waiting for their turn. So in that particular area, I thought this was kind of an interesting map. You see the Sasanian Empire, that was the Persian dynasty of the day. And this is one of those. See the Romans? I thought it was interesting in terms of areas, because when you see these maps, see Constantinople, we have lots to do on there. And then there's Damascus, and all go down south. There's Jerusalem. All of this is to say that when we look at the Sasanians and the Romans, we think of what a military struggle there was. It's almost like going back and forth and back. It'd make you militarily seasick. I mean, it's like, because these borders are not very well established. You know, one side takes it, one side will take it back. So they're called Sasanians or Persians, and we understand that this is a constant struggle. There was one point I remember in the 3rd century when a Roman emperor, and this is so embarrassing, was actually conquered. And I mean, taken personal hostage. And I think they knocked him around a little and then executed him. I mean, you're sorry about it, but it's also a little embarrassing. But this is the way that was going on. And again, I'm not saying it's permanent, because the Sasanians are not going to last forever. The Parthians will take over. But the idea is we're always going to have them there. And they're always thinking, you know, this used to be ours and we like to take it back. And we think we have the resources. And so that particular area And you understand, and you know this area, Iran, and all that's south to there. And then you're looking down south and thinking, but all that oil, yeah, we're not ready for that, are we? So there it sits. Nobody's fighting about them because it's just there. So, oh, I have another map. And again, I love this one because this comes at the end of the period of imperial instability. And you know the big names, Diocletian and Constantine. And this could definitely be on the final. Fill in the blank, maybe. And for those of you who have encyclopedic knowledge, or you will, yes, that you will know these names thoroughly because you think that Diocletian, he's got a bad reputation. Yes, he does. He did not get a good Christian press. It's not like the Christians say he was real misunderstood. His mother didn't love him or whatever. No, the Christian press views him as evil, as in drool and the whole thing. Yeah, mad as a hatter. I think historians of today tend to have different points of view, let us say. But the important thing is that he was a military man. He didn't have what we would call a lot of Roman background. He was probably from the area, which is a nice area in case you have relatives there. Albania, way down south. And you say, what's a nice boy like this doing in a place? Well, this is what the army can do for you. Join the army and take over the world. It's very interesting the way Diocletian got there, but can't devote the class to Diocletian as much as I'd like to. How much was he educated? How did he know his declensions and conjugations? I'm not really sure he had taken a Latin crash course, but I do know he was a military figure. We often think of the military as being very elite, but this guy, he worked his way up. Yeah, so he didn't go to the academy or any of this, hoity-toity stuff. He was a regular soldier and worked his way up, becoming, I think, the leader of the Imperial Guard. And so eventually, he became, by hook or by crook, the ruler. And as ruler, he and his advisors decided there must be a better way to control all of this. And the reason I like the map so much is this will show you the so-called tetrarchy. Tetrarchy. It's the only time in my life I've ever heard that word. If you can find me another usage, I would always love you. Because, and you say, yeah, last night I ran into somebody talking about tetrarchs. And if you do that, I have $1 bill for you. Okay. I'm not into inflation. So $1, that's all you're getting. So tetrarch means rule by 4. Save that for Jeopardy. Okay. Rule by 4. It's really not, but the idea Diocletian was going to say, I want to share authority with you, but I'm still number 1. Do you understand? Say it after me. Say it loud, say it proud. I am a subordinate, and I love you very much, but I'd like to be a junior emperor and follow you. It's like that. You'll always understand you're not quite like me. I know, sir, you're the greatest. You're the best. Lick, lick, kiss, kiss. Yeah, you get me. So the idea was in the tetrarchy, you have four emperors, and I call them two seniors and two juniors. And no fair choosing kin folks. That's a no-no. You choose somebody, you go over the resumes, check their CVs, maybe have an interview and saying, gosh, you're so talented, you're a great military leader. The idea, though, is that, well, you see by the colors. You've got a Western junior emperor. What would that color be? It's sort of a, what would you call orange? Orange. Yeah. And then the senior emperor there would be on the continent and have, see Italy there. And then you see down across the Mediterranean Sea, Northern Africa. So that is what we would call the senior emperor. And then next to him, his area in red would be reddish, would be the junior emperor of the East. And then you go all the way over brown. Okay, got one right. Brown. That would be numero uno. I'm Diocletian and I'm bad. Yeah. And you say, wow, yeah, he would live near what we call Constantinople today. So in a place called Nicomedia, it's over there in the area of Turkey. So interesting that he didn't choose to live in the West, but you know, that just wasn't where the action was. Yeah. I mean, the wealthy area was there. So you have that, this is the tetrarchy. And the way it was going to work is, gosh, I have to be the junior emperor in the West, because that means you are 4 out of the 4. I mean, you're not going to say, you know, I think I deserve a little more than that. Of course, you're going to say, gosh, sir, I'm just happy to please. You know, it's like getting runner-up on the award, and you're saying, I'm just pleased to be nominated, I think. And then you come home and you're like, darn it. Because what's wrong with this? I'll tell you what's wrong now that you ask. There are not many folks. You say, but I love all this. Look, I mean, it's Britain. That's now. Get over it. This is the Roman Empire. And these areas are not densely populated. Sticks. Yeah. Sticks, rural, bucolic. I love that word. If you want to make country life romantic, and we're thinking about that. Yeah, I mean, it's like these areas are not where you want to be if you want to be some hot shot Roman leader. So this is the bottom. And of course, they have various administrators, bureaucrats, civilian and military. We love staff, assistant to the vice president, etc. Yeah. And like kudzu, they like to grow lots of them, the more possible. So all of that, and again, the idea being those two junior emperors, they're called Caesars. They wait around and see the Augustus and say, oh, sir, you know, we love you. You're wonderful. I'm sorry to hear about that bad medical report. Let's hope the Roman version of the Mayo Clinic will have better news. Yeah, you can just imagine. Because the idea is, I know that's kind of mean, but hey, we love power. And the idea is these Augusti, they were going to say, gosh, I love you so much. You've just been like a son. my health is not going well. So I want to give all the power to you. He said, oh, sir, I can never be like you, but I'll try. You can imagine it's what these people sleep and dream about. Their fantasy. Unfortunately, it never seemed to work very well because Junior is always waiting there. My dad really wanted me to have it. I hate you. You know, and that, well, that I won't bore you with that, but you can well understand the idea. It seemed like a good idea in Diocletian's planning room, but human greed and ambition never made it work very well. But these basic areas would more or less survive the failure of a tetrarchy. The famous Constantine, about whom we'll get shortly, would be surrounded by family, and so he would revert to the hereditary form, and it would go on until the last one, famously known by the Gore Vidal book, which came out when I was in school.
1960.
Thank you. Just a veritable temple of knowledge. Yes.
In ruins.
You're gonna make an A if you keep it up. Not making any promises, but that particular book was about Julian the Apostate. And I don't go around calling that on the streets of Auburn or anywhere in Lee County, really, screaming out of my window, "You're an apostate." I would never hurt anybody. It was like I had somebody in an Ollie class say, "Would anybody know what you were talking about?" I said, "Probably not. So I'll just keep it to myself." In any event, that was the end of the Constantinian line. All of this is to understand the issues that are faced in this late period of the Roman Empire. But it will go on. It is not a quick death. It's a long death. Yes, slow and in many ways painful. There will be signs that it'll get better and then go back downhill. Some of the solutions, including everybody's favorite, bureaucracy. And what will the bureaucracy do? You ever heard of the IRS? I can introduce you. It's like everything is about the military, because you're probably thinking bureaucracy so they can free dental care or provide people with greater heart monitoring. No. You need to get over that. You're too good. Yeah. It's like everything is the army, everything is the military, everything is about increasing forces, benefits, be all that you can be. Do I need to go on? I don't think so. I think you get the idea that taxation will increase on what population there is because they've got to provide for the military. And as they provide for the military, they have to increase it because of Persians or Germans, whatever it may be. Now, the laws to control prices will be issued by Diocletian. Believe it or not, archaeologists actually found pieces of Diocletian's edicts limiting prices. You could read about this sometime. It's fascinating because they will tell every item and what you can maximally charge or service, whatever it may be. And if you go beyond that, capital punishment for you. And don't ask why. You know, because you're a bad Roman. you got it coming. You are a cheat. So yeah, so they had that, and then the hereditary occupation, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, everybody's got a job. And he said, but Dad, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a tax collector. No, no, son. We really, our family, we do bread. So that's what you'll be doing. Love bakeries. More bureaucrats for dividing up authorities and making armies smaller and more easily movable for the purpose of controlling lands wherever it may be. Because as time had gone on, the land authority had become more and more unstable. And again, it's not like all this happens overnight. We always have to remember how long all this went on. And you stop and think, in our world, so much changes so fast. Sometimes we think it was like that then, and I don't think so. I mean, I think it lasted, Roman authority, that is to say, lasted a long time. And then suddenly they were aware that the process had led them to become far more, shall we say, insecure in terms of their authority. And both, I would say, in fairness, Diocletian during his time and Constantine and his sons, they tried to work on this. Of course, they did so by ways that were quote unquote un-Roman. I mean, because the old Roman ideals, I mean, that was pretty much gone. The idea of the Senate and the consuls, the stuff that they always teach you in Roman history, and you think back in the Republic and the ideals. That's really not going to work anymore. It's not going to wash. They probably try to maintain those institutions in the sense of being on paper. And a lot of these cities, they would have their own senates and their own authorities, but we understand that this is mostly in theory, not in reality, because these people with the real power are Roman officials. Now, does that mean they are Roman? No. In fact, very few are. Neither Constantine nor Diocletian would be what you call a hometown boy. Somebody said, yeah, I come from around here. I've always, lived in the Roman suburbs, mom and dad. No, I mean, it's like, but are they Romanized? I think they knew their conjugations and declensions like you will. Yeah. 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 Your new path. Yes. Got a lot planned. So then we come to what all the publicity is about. Christianity. Boy, oh boy, this is where Diocletian really gets his bad name. I don't think it's so much about the business of price control, but I remember, as some of you may, in the early 1970s, Lord, I got really excited because they would bring up Diocletian on television. I would say, God, I've waited this long. And now we can all share in the Diocletian joy. For those of you far too young to know about 1971, the government tried a wage and price freeze. Did I say it seems like a good idea at the time? I don't know about that, but it was no more successful than was Diocletian's efforts. Why did Diocletian do it? Well, I think he did it because he wanted to save the empire, and he said, I don't like inflation. I say that every time I go to my grocery store, not calling any names.
Okay.
I love all the grocery stores. I try to be ecumenical, yes, about my grocery store. But when I see those prices, my yogurt price, I may have to buy the store brand. Yes, yes. In an effort of economic retrenchment. But the idea being that Diocletian said, high prices are the curse of the wicked, and the gods don't like it. And if the gods don't like it, and I'm going to be one very soon, and that means I'm God to be, I'm breathing, so I can't be a god yet. I'm sort of like a godlet. So I know. It's like future gods of Rome, that sort of thing. That's true, though. They actually did believe that. So he said. In any event, as one of the gods, we do not, the heart and put the cross through. We do not like high prices. And if you try to put one, yep, you're going down. Because that is wicked and evil, and we don't want to hurt people. We love people. Could burst out in the carpenters, but I'm not going to. Let's just get the idea that here we are going to do what is best. The idea, of course, is that even though this failed, he had a maximum price for the army. So that's all that really mattered. Said, but I'm a civilian. Why should I have to pay so much for my items? Well, you're a loser. You're not that important. It's all about the military is what I want to say. So I don't want to think Joe and Jane consumer. It's not like we're worried about you, okay? You got your troubles. So I asked Jupiter and Juno what you ought to do. We can't help you in our department. We need the revenue. So we're working it. And then there's the matter of those Christians. Oh, boy. By the time of Diocletian, there was what shall I call it? A significant Christian minority, primarily urban, primarily Eastern. I'll make it with those two qualifications. And perhaps primarily female. Don't want to be too generalizing, but I hope you'll accept that much and understand that, while generally speaking, Romans tended to be tolerant. There was, by the time of Diocletian, a sense that Christians might have been troublesome because they were somewhat like those troublesome Jews. And they also talked a lot about their God. And we already have our God. His name is Diocletian. God to be. So that's a lot of problems. Now, there are other stories that there were people in Diocletian's court who were secret Christians. A lot of this, you could probably make some money, write a novel about it. I was a Christian spy, and I always think about these romantic stories and all that. I don't know about that, but suddenly, perhaps persuaded by his advisors, Diocletian more or less announced the persecution of Christians. It was not a lengthy persecution, but it was empire-wide. And when it failed, Diocletian abandoned it. It's not through his whole reign. And he advocated, by the way, he said, I want to have retirement. Yeah. I want to retire to my estate. in Albania, I might add, sunny Albania. And he just sort of like, I don't know who played the part in the Diocletian movie, maybe Marlon Brando, and little farming and thinking about, you think he's thinking about all those people that got mowed down, you know. Sorry I had to hurt them, but but it can be hard work to be emperor. But anyway, he got a nice lengthy retirement out of that, but he had already abandoned the pursuit of Christians. So that is to be borne in mind. I'm not advocating even a temporary persecution of Christians. I'm merely noting that it didn't last his whole reign. It was like, we'll see if this works. And many people did more or less abjure that religious idea. Who knows what any of us would do under torture. But it didn't work in terms of destroying Christianity. And some years later, not that many, there would come another military conqueror, Constantine. And of course, we all know the story of the vision over Milvian Bridge and Constantine putting the sign of cross on his soldiers' shields. So the Edict of Milan, which we'll talk more about, and suddenly, after persecutions, now suddenly Christianity will be legalized and tolerated. If I had, just dreaming of fighting inflation now, if I had $1 for every time that I corrected in a blue book where a student said Christianity abolished every other religion, you'd be looking at a wealthy plutocrat right now. Yes, filthy rich. God, evil money. I could just go with Kroger without a coupon and just go wild. But it didn't happen. The idea is Constantine in the Edict of Milan says everyone can worship as you wish. It's called toleration. But even then, 311, in that very early part of the 4th century, you have that sense. Yeah, go ahead. You like your idols. Yeah, go ahead. Go on, tolerating you. But you understand if you're like sort of following the signs and saying, I bet he doesn't like us. I notice he's not coming to our temple anymore. He doesn't stop by and say that, hey, our goddess. They can just sense something's not the same. Is something wrong? What if we, So we understand this is the beginning of the end. But it's not official. They're just signs. When you see Constantine and his wife and son and all, they start going to a church. And if I were on the pagan payroll, I would be thinking about getting another job, be sending out the resume, because, paganism is not cool anymore. Okay. So we're going to be out of work. Our ISIS people or Mithras people. Yeah, if you were working as a priest there. The Juno crowd. Yeah, you can bridle. Yeah. So all of that is to say then, in this early 4th century period, Christianity is beginning to get a favored position. And it seems very odd when you think about, what is the figure of 10%? Maybe in the East, and much smaller than that in the West, which is always an interesting thing. Why more Christians in the East? Well, I think that has to do, of course, with where Christianity came from originally, right? So missionaries brought Christianity in the West, and I mean it grew, but not at that rate. 5% I've read. Now, do you notice the word diocese? I always loved that because those of you who are Roman Catholic, Episcopalian, know about diocese. And this is the first usage that I know about. And my assumption is that Christian leaders took up this language to specify areas of church authority, like a bishop and a diocese, that kind of thing. Now, it's interesting when you have a diocese. Remember when we talked about the junior emperor? Okay, so there will be, and you'll love this, a vicar. Some of you will know the term vicar. I remember in the Episcopal Church, a vicar was a church leader when you couldn't afford to have your own rector. So you have very hierarchical, right? So the vicar will rule over this, say, all this will be yours, you'll answer to the junior emperor. Oh, you'll have your own staff, and oh yeah. And probably your entourage, and I guess it includes your dental insurance and all of that, all your perks, all of that. Lots of people sending in resumes to get jobs. But let's just say you're a vicar in the Diocese of Britain, and you're going to like a big get together with all the vicars. You're vicar of Britain. Bummer. I mean, you're a vicar, but you're the less of the less. The bottom. Yeah, but I'm a vicar. I'm really hot. Yeah. Everybody like, yeah, but it's sort of like bottom of the barrel. Yeah, I know it hurts, but Diocese of Gaul. Ooh, wine, Bordeaux. See Bordeaux down there? Yeah, there are all kinds of wonderful places in our world. But you understand, again, as you move eastward, Diocese of Egypt, Diocese of Asia. And we're thinking lots and lots of St. Paul's letters and travels. And when we get into all of those areas, I just wanted you to be aware, though, that those dioceses, then they are divided up into provinces with governors. You say, isn't that awfully bureaucratic? You think? Maybe, yeah. And perks, assistant to the associate vice president, over and over, because these people don't say, no, let me just do that so you don't have to create another position. Oh, no, we create another one and another, because they feed on each other. Yeah. I mean, it's a terrible disease. And that definitely goes on here in the Roman Empire, because you got a civilian bureaucracy, and then you got a military bureaucracy, and never the twain shall meet. And it's like, I could do both these. I'd love to be able to help. No. We need more jobs. And you say, isn't that taking away a lot of the resources? Well, yeah, but that's what it's all about. Bureaucracy can be very, very, shall we say, expensive. So that is the growth in these various diocesan areas. And so please understand, it looks a lot neater and better than it actually is when we think about how it was in real life. As far as bureaucracies, remember this Diocese of Britain, you have various provinces with their own bureaucracies. And a lot of people are probably saying, this is probably a losing proposition. And then you think, do we really want to cut out our own job? So a lot of this, but it's clear that probably the Romans by this point, 4th century, understand they bit off more than they can chew, but it's awfully hard to try to just say, maybe it's just time to go back home. We've had enough. That's hard to do, though. This is interesting because you reach the point, and this is the Roman Empire in the 5th century. And I'm thinking of somebody here that I'm going to give 3 numbers. And she will be ecstatic. I know, that's a cue for you. 476. I knew it. She knows that she is magnificent. 476. Everybody knows. I could walk the streets of Auburn tonight. Yes, they would. I have fantasies. Yeah, they're scary. But the idea of students saying, gosh, I never knew I would ever get to use this information. And a fellow lover of Romulus Augustulus, the last Roman emperor in the West. But again, if you're on Jeopardy, you might want to know that. Okay. Because I don't think many will know that. But seriously, by the 5th century, it is understood that the lack in the West of Roman ability to maintain its authority will lead to an increasing reality that if you're in the section that is made West, and that's kind of like that medieval influence here, we understand if you're in the West, we're probably more going to be in what will eventually be called medieval Europe. I'm not saying we've got that stew completely mixed up, because it's got a lot of simmering and stirring to create. But if you're in the eastern part, and there's one of our favorite cities, Constantinople, Istanbul, and you understand again, that's the East, and they got a very different agenda there. Think of Antioch, think of Jerusalem, think of Alexandria, think of Urban. Go Greek. Very, very different world indeed. So it's fair to say that whatever the differences are, they are very, very pronounced by this 476. That the little Roman emperor and the idea of like classes may have slowed down, teaching the Latin, and like you said, you mean we don't have any more Latin class? No. We just, people are just not learning it. They're just not as caught up in this whole Roman culture. So, Western lands, Latin language, and remember, until I was a boy, Latin was the language of the Catholic Church. I mean, it was, you think about that, for Latin lovers, it was quite a shock. Latin literature, I don't know if they have one of those books where you can read it on the sly and escape reading Ovid and Virgil, and you can know the plots without reading them. I don't even want to think about that. Architecture, oh gosh, if I say Romanesque architecture, some of the great cathedrals. The law of Rome, we think of universalism, And of course, the Roman legal principles. Think of Louisiana, Quebec, and all the other places, France, and all the other places where Roman law is applied. And Rome then just being emperor, or might I add, being pope. Could it be that God has a special emperor? Well, some say he did. And of course, that will be in some ways a legacy of the Roman experience as it is in Scripture, depending on your point of view. But whatever it is, Rome will maintain a symbolization as a symbol of universalism. You say, but 476, didn't that destroy all this? Not in my mind. I mean, it'll always be here. The unity, the universalism, whatever happens in actuality, I have the ideal working for me, and it will work very well for the Romans. Now, of course, there are those people who will come in and try to do something different and say, we don't really care about all that. And these, of course, are going to be the Germans, and we'll start there next time. Thank you all very much. See you next time. Thank you.